think with that, we are ready to go. Got a number of attendees, and again, we are so glad you're here. My name is John Gibbs. I'm a consultant to the city of Corte Madera, town of Corte Madera, and I'll be helping facilitate this evening as we're going to be talking about Paradise Drive and the complete street planning that is underway. Tonight is the first in a series of community meetings. Tonight is really about us listening. We're going to have a brief presentation and a little longer conversation with where we're able to answer some questions. There's no plan. Tonight is really just this team understanding more about the functions of the roadway, the opportunities of this project, and just to make sure that we understand community's concerns and interests. With that, I would like to introduce RJ Suko and from the town of Corte Madera to kick us off.
Great. Yeah, first off, I'd like to thank you all for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us today. So this is the Paradise Complete Streets project. So this does represent an important corridor that extends from Westward Drive to the town limit just east of Robin Drive. As John mentioned, I'm RJ Suko, Director of Public Works for the town of Corte Madera. And this is the first of 3 program public workshops. Kind of in other words that John has expressed, our collective goal today is to introduce the right-of-way constraints, to obtain community feedback, and start establishing project goals. These goals and a summary of the public feedback will then be compiled and used by the project team to start developing alternatives that will then be presented at a future public workshop. Let's go ahead and share screen if we can, if we haven't already.
Yeah, we're just getting Poonam the ability to share the screen. So Lorena, please assist with that.
Next slide, please.
There we go. Terrific.
So yes, there we have the project corridor, Westward Drive on the far left side, Robin Drive there on the right side, and again, the project extends just to the east of that. To provide some additional background, this project has been discussed amongst the community for at least a decade. Where about half of the funding for this design phase originated from Measure A Safe Routes to School program funding back in 2010. For added context, the town's 2016 Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan proposes a Class 1 multi-use path from Westward Drive to Upland Circle. So Upland Circle's the street there that you can make out somewhat to the middle to the right, in combination with a Class 3 shared facility between cyclists and vehicles throughout the entire length. Next slide, please. So let's talk about outreach for a minute. For those that have been able to join us live tonight, you likely found out about this event through one of the following outreach or social media outlets. Given this corridor is a key regional route, we did want to expand our outreach in hopes of reaching a broader area, including Tiburon and unincorporated areas of Marin. For those that are unable to attend but do still desire to provide public input, it's not too late. Our plan is to post a video of the recording of this meeting on our town's project webpage, which has been entered into the chat already and will continue to do so, and extend the public comment period for at least through the end of the month. And so we'll continue to take additional feedback and comment, by email. In addition, our goal is to establish an email notification system, which I believe was just added to the webpage for future workshops. So if those people that aren't in attendance want to be included on future updates, they can do so by signing up there. If you are in attendance today, we will be able to capture your email and include you on those future notifications automatically. And with that, I'll start by introducing the project team, and I'll start with our town staff. So I want to introduce our town manager, Todd Cusimano, who's here to join us. Separately, we have Adam Wolf, our Director of Planning and Building. In addition, we have Phil Boyle, our Senior Planner. We also have Chris Good, our Senior Civil Engineer. And assisting with the controls, we have Lorena Barrera, our Admin Analyst. And we're trying some new features here on Zoom, so bear with us if there's a couple little, glitches or misfires along the way. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to John Gibbs to introduce the rest of the team on the consultant side. Thank you.
Great, thanks, RJ. And so important to go through the engagement process. A lot of noticing went out to make people aware of tonight, and we really want to keep that going. Many opportunities to give some input, and we'll share shortly a little bit more about the trajectory of the project, because tonight's not the last night for sure. As I mentioned, I'm John Gibbs. I'm a principal. I'm a landscape architect and planner at WRT. We're assisting with some facilitation and to help with the planning of this project. The lead engineer on the project is BKF, and Becky Dowers on the line. I'm joined at WRT by Poonam Narkar, senior planner and urban designer. And Poonam and I are engaged in both engagement, complete street projects, and some adaptation work around Marin County and around the Bay. There are some other team members that will be joining us at future meetings on transportation side of things. So with that, we just wanted to do a quick pop-up poll quiz. We didn't warn you that we were going to put you to work a little bit tonight. We would love to launch a quick poll and use the Zoom functions on your screen in order to just click these boxes. And this just gives us a sense of who's on the line. We'd love to know kind of who's here, what your interests are, where you live. So the first question is about where do you live? So just go ahead and click a quick answer to that. Do you live on the west side of the highway in Corte Madera, the east side in Corte Madera, or do you live outside of the town limits? And when we have a reasonable number, we'll quickly move to the next one.
Did you want me to share the results for the first one? We had 11
Sure.
responses.
Yeah, we can flash that up on screen. So a lot of folks are fairly local and living on the east side, a number of folks on the west, and also some that are outside of the town, and that would be expected. There's a lot of regional interests in this area. So the next question is, we know really important schools regionally here are right here in this corridor from Marin Country Day or Marin Montessori. And if you could just respond to that.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end this poll and share the results.
Great, thank you. Great, so a few folks from the school, we're really glad to have you, and actually vast majority are not at the school. We have ongoing conversations with the school and the administration, so their feedback is also really important. They have a lot of important interests here on this corridor. We had another question here just about the frequency. How often are you using the road? Are you out there daily? You must live in the immediate vicinity, more weekly or monthly. No right or wrong answers, just gives us a good sense of who's paying attention, and also helps us target our outreach perhaps a little differently, as in the future. Just really want to make sure we get a good cross section of folks that are invested in this project with us. Great, so a lot of probably some local neighbors, folks that know this place really well, and we're glad you're on the line. Okay, perfect. And lastly, you're on the road frequently. Are you biking? Are you walking? Are you driving? And it looks like we're only allowing a single choice on this one. So which one is maybe the most important to you, or the most frequent? Again, no wrong answer. And park means parking. great. A lot of folks cycling on Paradise Drive. That's great. We're glad you're here. And as we would expect, a number of folks driving, and good to see some walkers out there as well. A few folks that are parking. There's cool, really great access to some adjacent facilities. Also certainly parking and associated with the schools. Okay, with that, we can get right into a little bit more about the process. Thanks everybody for participating in those polls. We'll do a few more later on because they're just a great way to get a little bit more feedback. So moving a little bit more into the presentation, we wanted to share kind of where we are tonight and where this process is going. And we'll bring this back again a little later because you'll want to look at it after the presentation and think about your next points of engagement. So tonight, we're at the beginning. As RJ had explained, the need for the project's been identified. It's been talked about in a lot of different planning processes. But tonight's really the opening night for us to understand the key issues out there, and for you to help us understand your take on those key issues. From here, we're going to be developing conceptual alternatives, really understanding the engineering of the roadway, the rights of way, the utilities, the access, the transportation impacts, and we'll be coming back in February at a second meeting with ideas and actual concepts and actual designs that we can all evaluate together. From there, we continue moving forward, refining a design and moving it down to a preferred design, something that can go through environmental review, costing, et cetera, and then that can be presented. At that point, we might be down to just a few tweaks, but still some availability to review and to make some tweaks. And then this is a project that's going to be moving into final design and construction, and we can get into some more of those dates and timelines. This is definitely a multi-year process. All right, so I hope that's helpful for framing kind of where we are tonight and where this is going. Starting to talk now and zoom in a little bit more to the roadway. This is kind of the full extent of the corridor, and just understanding Paradise Drive, not just as a local street, but really as a regionally serving corridor. It's not only an important arterial within the town, it's providing access to a number of important places, both within the project corridor as well as beyond. It's also an important emergency evacuation route that's recognized by the county as it connects all the way over to Tiburon. And in the event of flooding or fire, landslides, or just other things that might block a roadway, it's a really important regional connection. And that's an important thing to note as part of this process. Zooming in, we just wanted to just highlight a few of the key things that we have going on in this corridor that we're aware of, and hopefully this is good background for you all. So obviously there's important schools, important access to those schools, but also to some residences that are also at some of those same intersections, and residences that are certainly beyond and all along the Paradise Drive corridor. There's a really important pedestrian crossings that happen in there, both through a bridge that's overhead, but there's also some planned improvements for some at-grade crosswalks in that area between the schools and at Upland. We're aware that there's parking that's shared back and forth across the roadway. There's students and teachers. There's a lot going on right in that intersection. We have our work cut out for us for sure. But there's also kind of a natural side to this corridor as well. The Ring Mountain Preserve is just adjacent to the south. There's a really important trail access point there. There's some on-street parking where people can stage and take off for cycling or hiking up on that hill. Audubon owns property, and there's some access to the marsh, and really important views. I'm sure that folks that live out along Paradise Drive and at points beyond kind of love the vast vistas out into the marsh as they go through here. And we would expect to, and we'd like to hear a little bit more about if that's something that resonates with you all. So now zooming in, what we're going to do is just kind of talk through some of the key issues that we've been aware of. And for many of the cyclists on the call, it's a 2-lane roadway. It has a a narrow shoulder, but there are no, currently there's no bicycle facilities striped out on this. It's planned as part of the regional and Bay Area wide Bay Trail. It's envisioned to have a facility of a Class 1 path somewhere along this corridor. That's certainly been talked about. And there's certainly need for regional cyclists getting home, for commuting, recreationally, and getting kids to school. There's a lot of folks that are parking along the shoulders. And in this photo, you can see some of the parking that's associated with the trailhead going up to Ring Mountain. There's also some parking that comes from the schools, and we're aware of maybe about a dozen parking spaces that are often used for the folks associated with the school. And if there's some other parking needs, we'd love to hear more about that today. There's another function that many of us are familiar with, and that has to do with some of the queuing that occurs along the street. So at pickup and drop off, largely associated with Marin Country Day, there's a lot of cars that are staging along the shoulder of the roadway and then making their right-hand turn into up and away. Up Anda Way. That street always gets me. I think that's one of the more clever street names that I've heard. There's quite a bit of queuing there, and so that's something we would want to be talking about tonight, because how do we accommodate that? How does that work? What are some of the impacts and some of the uncomfortable conflicts that are occurring with that? That's something we would expect to talk a little bit more about tonight, and also be able to come back with some ideas about how do we work with the schools, how do we provide safe access and convenient access to families, but there's lots of other things that need to happen along this roadway as well, we're quite aware. So some important balancing to be done there. We have some photos on the next slide just that starts to show some of that condition, and even the aerial photo that starts to document some of that. So a lot of this queuing is occurring during a specific time of the day, largely with pickup, and it's mostly occupying the unpaved dirt shoulder there on the south side of the street. There's also some ongoing seasonal events on this roadway, and this is certainly evidence of just the big rainstorm that we had last week. Large amounts of standing water. This is from overland flows, large areas of ponding. It does tend to cross the road. And as we look to, this is certainly an inconvenience for now, but as we look to the future, we're also aware of generally of rising seas due to climate change, and at some horizon, we're going to have exacerbated conditions of rainstorm events and the flooding that we just need to address today. But also looking to the future, there's certainly a conversation there as well. So this really brings us now to, okay, well, we have a number of things that we want to think about related to cyclists, related to parking, related to queuing, but we only have so much space. We have an existing right-of-way, and we don't own the property outside of that. And so we have to really be able to work within our means. There's also a lot of utilities and things along this corridor as well. And I think we have a subsequent slide that starts to describe that. But we have a real limited ability to expand this right away. We really have to work within our means. And if we could go to the next slide. These are some of the utility poles. So we do have instances of utility poles on both sides of the street. You can't really imagine getting a bike lane through utility poles or a widened shoulder. Parking certainly works between poles. We don't have the opportunity to do an undergrounding. There may be a little flexibility because some of these services are communications, so that we might be able to consider some consolidation. But right now, it's that starts to be a pretty big expense, and we're not interested in undergrounding. That's probably not going to be a very feasible approach due to the incredible costs associated with that process. And then some of the other things that are going on along this corridor and immediately adjacent within, to constrain our right-of-way, just has to do with some of the existing habitat areas and wetlands that have been delineated and identified, and the vegetation that supports those really means that we can't widen this road and start to pave over those sorts of environmental features. That's just not going to be a feasible direction. And I think that the town has made it really clear that those are important resources, the natural resources along this marsh, associated with Ring Mountain, associated with the salt marsh, and those those seasonal wetland areas. Those are really incredibly important resources. And so there's not a lot of interest and ability, frankly, to make a lot of changes to those. I think the next slide just has a couple pictures of it. We're within a BCDC jurisdiction area, which is also an agency that we will be going through permits for, and they're certainly interested both in public access, but also the retention of these environmental features. And the California Department of Fish and Wildlife is another important regulatory agency, also really interested in preserving and protecting these open space and natural resource features. So again, just working within our right-of-way and getting really creative is going to be an important action, and the team is kind of gearing up for a process to get really creative, and we're excited about your thoughts and your ideas tonight. So within that right-of-way that we have available, we put together just a very simple kind of cartoony description that describes, okay, 2 travel lanes, 11 feet in each direction. There are these kind of uneven shoulders. Sometimes they're interrupted by power poles and communication poles. Sometimes they're not. And then there's the more natural kind of landscape features that extend beyond this right-of-way. Our average width, and again, it varies just a little bit throughout the corridor, but generally a little over 40 feet. And so, we have our work cut out for us to then start to figure out what do we do with that. When we come back in February for another public workshop, we will have developed some ideas based on some feedback and direction tonight. So we'll be able to come back at that point with hopefully some interesting ideas where we can start to see trade-offs. We can have a really productive conversation around some potential solutions. So considerations that we are kind of already expecting to come up in the conversation tonight, and kind of want to cue you guys up in a way. Consideration of bicycle facilities, whether it's Class 1 multi-use path, that would be a 2-directional path located on one side of the road, or Class 2 bike lanes, traditionally on the shoulders of the lane, sharrows, pedestrian paths, or sidewalks. The pedestrian beacon, this would be really at the crosswalk there between the schools. Travel lanes are kind of an obvious one. Cars are still going to be able to pass on the street, and then some space for queuing. We have a couple of supplemental pictures just so we're all aware of kind of what we mean by these facilities. So this is an image showing a typical Class 1 path. This image shows a Class 2 bike lane, in this instance without a buffer. There's some other instances around the county with a buffer. Those are typically about 6 feet wide. And a Class 3 is more of a shared lane. It's just making sure that the lane is wide enough and that there's a marking to alert drivers that bikes are also using the road, and they should share the road. And it's also similar to basically a Class 3. So this could also be considered. And there's a sidewalk as an example, but I think we all know what a sidewalk looks like. All right. So with that, we've kind of walked through a little overview, and that's going to start to wrap up our presentation and some of our just initial understanding of this corridor. We wanted to launch a little poll here again and get you guys thinking and give us a little bit more feedback, and then we're going to move into a conversation. So again, no wrong answers, and we can continue this verbally in a few minutes. So looking at some of the critical issues, what do you guys think is the most critical to be addressed? What's the big issue out here? What's really your top concern? Is it about traffic, the queuing and access to school? Is it the lack of bicycle facilities? Is it the seasonal flooding, or is it something else? And you'll be able to verbally tell us the other if that's your answer. How are we doing?
We have 77% participation.
Come on, we want, just like when we fundraise for our schools, 100% participation.
Okay. I'm gonna end the poll now. There are 2 people that are signed in twice, so I think we got 100%, even though it says 88.
Awesome.
And
So glad.
those are the results.
Good diversity of feedback here. So the traffic and some of the queuing, access to schools, that was important, but very much tied with the bicycle access. And I'm really interested in the other. And so glad we'll be able to hear some of those comments and questions here coming up. Thanks, everybody. I think we're going to do one more, which is a little bit more about the issues and some of the next steps. So this is a long one, take a little bit more time to kind of read through it, but which issues should the project team prioritize for further study? And oh, this was a single choice. I wish that this had been a multiple choice, because we would actually like you to be able to give us more comments, but we'll go with your most important one. And then again, through the comments later, we can hear a little bit more. So more answers here.
And I will check how to do multiple choice next. It didn't really say, so I just made that assumption. My apologies for that.
No, that works. We're getting our Zoom legs going here.
Mm-hmm. We have 13 responses so far. Maybe we'll give it a few more seconds.
Yes. Make your choice. No wrong answer.
All right, we'll go ahead and close it off now.
Great. Thanks, everybody. So some good cycling community out there advocating for class 1. So really separating cyclists and pedestrians from the roadway. Also some important notes about managing queuing during the school pickup and drop off. A little bit about traffic control, traffic calming features. And then lastly, retaining on-street parking and public access, specifically Ring Mountain, but also other, the Marsh open space, but Ring Mountain kind of the main one there. That's great, very helpful, everybody. And I think we have one more that we were going to launch, just a little bit more specific, zooming into the bike and the pedestrian options. The question is, which bicycle and pedestrian option would you prefer to use? So whether you're currently a cyclist or not, just help us understand kind of what would be a good approach. Is it an on-street bike lane with a separated pedestrian facility, like a sidewalk that's separated? So this might be a class 2 bike lane with a sidewalk somewhere else on the corridor, or is it a shared lane for bikes and vehicles in the roadway, plus a multi-use path for bicycle and pedestrians, likely on the south side? So this would be that more widened shoulder. So certain cyclists would feel comfortable riding in the roadway and just using a little bit of an extra shoulder width versus kids going to school, recreational riders. Perhaps those groups would prefer strongly to have a separated multi-use path, and this would then accommodate both. Or is this all wrong? And we'll talk about it. How are we doing on participation?
There were some that were slowly coming in. We have about 80%. I'll go ahead and end the poll now and share those results.
Great. So definitely some preference for the for a separated multi-use path for cyclists and pedestrians, and recognizing that there would be some shared lanes for vehicles and perhaps more faster moving experienced cyclists. That has a little bit more priority, but there's a large contingent that didn't feel great about either of those options. And so that'll be great because we'll be able to talk a little bit more about that and kind of hear those comments coming up. As you can imagine, within the limited right of way, we got to make some trade-offs and be pretty creative. So you can kind of tell what we're working towards here. So lastly, and before we kind of open this up, just wanted to come back because now you all are wondering, okay, wait, what are you guys doing tonight and what are we doing next? So again, tonight is the presentation that we just gave, and it's just understanding the key issues, and we're going to talk a lot more about that coming up here in just a couple minutes. And our next meeting, we'll be coming back to you with some potential strategies. So a series of alternatives that look at it different ways. We'll get a lot of good input on that and be able to evaluate to try to identify what's the best way to move forward. And then the team will continue working and come back with a preferred scheme down the road. The second public meeting is being planned for February. So we don't have a date that we're handing out tonight, but if you've signed in, if you saw the notices, and we definitely want to stay in touch with you. And so we'll want to flash the way to stay in touch on screen again a little later. And then you can also note that we have a website for the project. This is nested within the town of Corte Madera's website. And you can see the link for it down there at the bottom. Oh, perfect. There's the website. And it'll have the video recording from tonight. It's going to have the staff email address and abilities to get on the list and make sure that you're noticed and can attend future meetings. All right. So with that, what we're going to do is ask you to use the hand raise function on there on your screen associated with Zoom, and our Zoom master is going to call your name and unmute you so that we get to chat and we can start recording your comments. We may be able to answer some questions we really may not. I don't think we know all the answers right now, and we're not here tonight to really to figure everything out. So if we have some thoughts and you guys ask us some good questions, we might be able to comment, but kind of no guarantee. We'll be able to record everything and make sure that shapes and drives the kind of work that we do over the next couple months, and we can come back with perhaps the answer that you're actually looking for.
Okay, so we have two hands raised right now. The first one is for David McPherson, and if you unmute yourself, you should be able to speak.
Great.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Thanks, David, and thanks everybody. We'll take about 2 minutes. We're not being strict with any time here. We're so glad you're here. Take it away.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a few questions about the public outreach, then some engineering questions, and I'm going to provide you with my comments. And the first question I have is whether or not anyone from the town or BKF engineering or engineers has met with or discussed this project with Marin Country Day School, particularly the queuing.
Yeah, town has definitely been in talks with Marin Country Day.
Recently?
For sure. I don't have dates handy,
Okay.
but yeah.
How about Marin Montessori? Okay. How about the Cove School? No Cove School?
Okay. Not sure. Yep.
How about the Mariner Cove Neighborhood Association? And the Preserve at Marin, which are the apartments and homes on Robin Drive, and the Marin County Bicycle Coalition. These are all key stakeholders who had no notice of tonight's meeting, and I want to make sure that we do better next time. I'm the co-chair of the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and I received notice yesterday at 4 p.m. So I can assure you that there's lots and lots of people out there that have no idea that this is going on. I personally put it on next door. So let's all do much better at the outreach, particularly given that the town has allocated $500,000 or thereabouts for outreach and engineering. So my next question has more to do with engineering. Has Paradise Drive been surveyed from Seawolf Passage to Robin Drive?
I would let
I think it'd be
Becky.
helpful
or-
with all folks, John, if we get
Sure.
all the questions and then we can kind of answer them, kind of all at once.
Yeah, that sounds
That's
good.
fair, RJ. My point on that question is, we've been working on this for 12 years and we had this fantastic progress made with the widening of the sidewalk on Paradise Drive on the north side. And that I know was surveyed and we had to use literally every inch. So I'm interested to know if Seawolf Passage to Robin Drive has been surveyed and whether or not anybody from an engineering standpoint has determined whether or not there's sufficient space right away on the north side to continue the sidewalk, an 8-foot wide sidewalk. If not sufficient space exists, then are we looking at the south side to continue the multi-use path? Where that right of way exists and how it's going to be allocated is super important. My next question has to do with whether or not anybody from BKF has actually walked the project from Robin Drive to Seawolf and or biked it. And I'll keep going. I'm just wondering whether or not in discussions between the town and BKF, if there's been any sort of consensus already drawn as to whether or not this facility should be on the north side or the south side. And my final question is whether or not anybody from BKF has inspected the Charles F. McGlashan pathway in Mill Valley. And if not, I strongly encourage you to do that. I think RJ was even involved in getting that done. And it is a facility that's almost identical in length to what we're dealing with tonight. And it also deals with many of the problems with sea rise and is a combination of paved and a boardwalk construction, which if this happens on the south side to Robin Drive is a solution that has already been engineered and available to see in Mill Valley. I'll let you, that's all the questions I have and pretty much my comments.
Great. Thank you so much for all that. I think we were able to answer the meetings and the coordination with the schools, and there were a couple that you noted that I think we've taken note, and we can make sure that we're reaching out more specifically to some of those groups. You've noted a number of important stakeholders that we want to make sure are aware of this in a timely manner. That's always a challenge. You want to get the word out. You want everybody to know about it, and it's always difficult to try to capture everybody. So noted, and we're going to keep working at making sure that everybody has really advanced notice, and this is and everybody's tuned into this. And we have a pretty good runway towards February, so I feel pretty good about that.
Next, we have Chris Tufts, who can now speak and ask questions.
Yep.
Well, yeah, John, do we want to?
Yeah, I was going to say I wasn't quite done. I thought we could just go over a couple of the other questions so that we ask you. Yeah. So that's fine. So we'll just want to answer a couple of the questions, and then we'll go to the next speaker. There's a question about the extent of the survey, and I believe the project has been surveyed.
Yeah, so I think specifically David was asking if the survey had extended down to Seawolf, and there may be a past survey that has, but this project and this consultant has been scoped specifically for Westward Drive to just east of Robin Drive. And so that's just what the grant funds have allowed us to do and what we're focused on today. Obviously, understanding the holistic picture is also important. And so there's the, bike master plan, which I know, David, you're full aware of and speaks to that to some degree. But no, we have focused on westward to just east of Robin Drive.
Right. And there were a number of other good comments and questions about experiencing the corridor, walking, biking, also about preference of where different facilities would be located. And no, there's no decision about those locations. And yes, BKF has been out there. I think there's certainly more to do. And if you have specific things that we should be taking a look at, we're all ears. I think with that, we can go to Mr. Tufts.
Thanks.
Thanks for your patience.
No, not at all. So I'm a Corte Madera resident west of 101, alumni of Marin Country Day, and parent of a 3.5-year-old at Marin Montessori. And I both drive a car and ride a bicycle with my young child on this segment, depending on weather. And this segment of road gives me the most concern about the safety of my child's life when I ride my bike. Paradise, absolutely is a vital access road for a large number of residents of East Corte Madera and Tiburon. Happens to be flat and unbroken by stop signs or lights, so cars are moving fast. I think the speed limit is roughly 35 miles an hour. And I don't generally favor slowing down cars, carte blanche, though I'm an avid cyclist. And I don't advocate a speed limit reduction, but I'd like to see the bicycle or multi-use path separated from the roadway, perhaps, bidirectional on the south side of the roadway, and that separate path pushed all the way to Robin Drive and not just Upland Circle. So I think that translates to class 1 from your outline and description. I would highlight around the queuing that a substantial portion of it should be temporary due to COVID, which has pushed carpooling out of practice just for the time being. Marin Montessori, specifically for its part, is actively reducing queuing on the street by expanding the number of cars that it handles on property, and partially is currently worse on Paradise because we normally queue on Robin Drive, which is currently under construction and is otherwise more than able to handle the limited amount of on-road queuing that needs to happen at pickup and drop off. So that's my comment.
Great, thank you for all of that. We're taking lots of notes, and yeah, interesting point about COVID increasing the number of cars picking up and dropping off. That's been a phenomenon. So yeah, noted that. Great. Who's our next speaker?
And now we have Courtney Dennis.
Hi, Courtney.
And
Thanks.
You can go ahead and unmute yourself, and then you'll be able to speak.
Courtney, just go ahead and unmute, and we're all ears. Well, maybe we will come back to Courtney.
Yeah, we can have Warren Wells. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Warren.
Hi, everybody. This is Warren Wells. Is this just for questions, or are we allowed to make comments here as well? Just wondering.
Please, both are terrific.
Wonderful, great.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I'm Warren Wells, Policy and Plan Director for the Marin County Bicycle Coalition. So just something that was mentioned earlier in the presentation was that there was a lot of noticing for this that had happened for this meeting, but to my knowledge, both the Facebook post and town website post went up yesterday afternoon, which is not a ton of time to make people make plans. So speaking of the project itself, obviously, Paradise Drive is a very popular recreational bicycle route. A ton of our members, I ride there very frequently. But that being said, our priority here is ensuring an all ages and abilities facility that connects East Corte Madera and these two schools. And so, I realize this has been talked about a bit. Queuing looms very large in the conversation, but it seems to be made up, from the presentation, by a lot of people who are driving their kids to and from school. And while no doubt some of those families live outside of biking distance, many of them live much closer, but they choose to drive their kids because they're not comfortable with them biking on the existing narrow shoulder on such a high-speed road, which I understand. And so the question is, we need to ask here whether, a 5-foot paint-only lane, so-called class 2, would allay their concerns about traffic safety, or as in my experience, whether a grade separate path would actually make parents feel safe with their kids biking to school. So, that's really what we're advocating for here. Obviously, I realize there's a lot of constraints, very challenging project. there's parking here, and again, with that, the question is always, what's the best use of our public right of way? Is it for private car storage or for facilitating travel for school children? And we fall on the latter side there. So again, recognizing it's a challenging project, and we're looking forward to working with the town and have the school and biking and driving community work going forward. Thanks so much.
Thank you for all your comments. Much appreciated.
Okay, next up we have Jean. Oops. One sec.
Yes, hi, this is Jean Severinghouse. Am I on now?
Yes, we hear you.
Yes.
Thanks so much
Great.
for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to bring up two ideas. One is the idea that we need to address our greenhouse gas reduction goals really seriously. We're in the middle of the Conference of the Parties in Glasgow right now. And the surveys show that 2/3 of people would like to ride a bike. They have one in their garage and they don't ride it if you don't separate us from the street, from cars. I have lots of neighbors, both seniors and children, who cannot share space on the street with a car. They just won't. So they don't ride, so they drive. So in order for kids to go to the Cove School coming west and to these two schools going east, it seems to me critical that we provide a separated Class 1 pathway. The second idea I wanted to bring up is the Bay Trail. It considers continuity really important. And so there's a little stretch of Bay Trail that's kind of isolated on the south side of the street further to the west. And in order to provide significantly improved connectivity between major activity areas, which I think I submit we have on both ends of this stretch, that doesn't currently exist. We don't have that, and it's not currently usable by the public. So the Bay Trail considers making that continuity be critical. And I looked up the 2016 plan update, the bike and pedestrian plan update. And that is the highest priority listed in the plan in project prioritization, is to establish continuity for the general public between areas where they really can't use it. And I would submit this is a key area that we can't use. I can walk on the shoulder, sort of. I walk, I bike, I drive, but we can do so much better here if we have some kind of continuity that we bring in with the Bay Trail and go all the way to Robin Drive. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now we'll have Cheryl Lonzanotti, and then I'll also read other comments and questions that are there, unless you'd like to do so, John. But I'll allow Cheryl to talk first.
Great.
Yes, I just wanted to comment on, well, my comment is referring to what our goals should be, and also the poll that we took. And I think it was first or second question where we only had a single choice. And I responded other, because I think the bicycle facilities are important, but they also address traffic, because we do have local families that utilize the schools and have to get their kids to school. And if we have, and also local people are going to Ring Mountain to hike. And if they have a way to take their bike out there, I think it will cut down traffic. And as Jean said, we need to be mindful of reducing greenhouse gases, and that will address the drainage problems that we have there. So looking at it globally, I think it's really important to have bicycle facilities that will encourage people who aren't currently riding, but could very well do so. And I think that makes for looking at facilities that have separated pathway for bicycles and pedestrians. So that's what the comment I wish to make.
Thank you, Cheryl. I am just looking for any specific questions in the chat. I think for the most part, I'm seeing some really good comments, and we can all see those. Access to Ring Mountain was one of the more recent ones, and there's some specific points about particular flat areas of land at the shoulder. And I think this is kind of the good creative thinking that is helpful to us.
And I was about to elaborate on that in the chat, but just something that I think we all want to consider, because I think it does have an impact on many of our construction projects and the cost we pay for that work. But we do use and really rely on, I think, a lot of the flat areas reference for staging for construction work. And so if we do not have that ability as part of our CIP projects, we can expect pricing to go up. And so that's something that should really just kind of be considered in the overall decision-making process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, many uses for some of the open gravel areas. There's a question about how narrow does the right-of-way get in the most constrained part with the utility poles. I'm not sure we have a specific dimension. We said that in a typical part of the corridor, we were at about 42. Sometimes the poles are inset a little, as we saw, and sometimes they're more towards the outside. So I'm not sure we have a specific number, but yeah, you can tell that where those poles land is a bit of a constraint, or it's expensive. Those are the two choices. If somebody has a specific number, we can.
I can elaborate on that slightly,
Sure.
John. So
Thanks,
the right-of-way does vary along the corridor. In the most constrained portions of the corridor, right-of-way is about 60 feet, and those poles are within the right-of-way along the entire corridor. And so, like, generally, the pole-to-pole width, where we have poles on both sides of the road, just west of the schools, is somewhere around 50 to 55 feet of clear space between the poles.
Great, thanks.
Then Courtney Dennis was able to type in the question. So they wrote, "We live on the corner of Westward and Paradise. Our main concern is traffic calming and safety, as well as making the intersection of Westward and Paradise safer for drivers, pedestrians, and bikes. We have seen several people do donuts, reckless driving in the intersection. It seems that making this intersection smaller would help, as there is less open space for people to perform stunts. Also, is a roundabout a possibility?"
Yeah, good comments. Yeah, so specifically referring to the intersection at Westward and Paradise. So I think that's something that we can take a look at. It is a pretty large area. They're pretty large radius turns coming in and out, and it's important to provide good access. But maybe there's some pedestrian and bicycle enhancements that can also happen there. So I noted, unless somebody has real specific additional comment to make there. Thanks for typing that into the chat, because we weren't able to hear you before.
Okay, now we have Tom, who's gonna provide some comments. Go ahead, Tom.
Oh, hello. I'm unmuted.
You are. We hear you, Tom. Thanks so much.
Okay, great. Yeah, my name's Tom Novsiger, and I live on the east side of Corte Madera in Mariner Cove. And so I I'm a very avid cyclist. I'm also on the BPAC committee with David McPherson for the last 5 years or so. So yeah, this is a near and dear corridor to my heart, because I've been living here in this area for probably a dozen years or so. And I have a 13-year-old, and we ride this all the time. So I guess one comment that I would have is that, on one hand, there's a pretty amazing multi-use bike path that we have now that goes from the far side of Nordstrom's past Macy's the whole way through, and they just did what's turned out to be a really good wide sidewalk across the opposite side of Nugget the whole way to Seamast. And so I've been watching this really carefully, especially since the project started. And I guess I wanted to throw something out there that I hadn't thought of really before watching the new project that is nearing completion. And I wonder, or I would like the group to consider continuing that sidewalk, the wide sidewalk, which I guess would be the class 1 multi-use kind of separated path, the whole way down to the schools on the north side of the road. And that would include the whole way down, because how cool would it be for the gentleman who was saying he's riding from West Corte Madera down to Montessori School, and what if he really didn't have to cross Paradise Drive, either at the light at Seamast and El Camino to get to the other side to eventually connect into, a 100-yard strip of multi-use path that's awesome right across from the Cove School. But it's almost like a non sequitur to try to figure out how to solve the problem. So I guess I just wanted to throw out this thought. I'm sure it's not unique, but to extend and to stay on the north side of Paradise, which would keep extending the multi-use path the whole way from beyond Nordstrom's and Macy's, past Nugget Market, and continue the whole way down to the schools. I think you would get a lot more participation of people riding bikes and walking down to that area. And then you just have some strategic flashing crosswalks like you have now at a couple different spots there. One would be, I guess, where this project would start to the big, huge intersection that that is a large intersection, but maybe there could be a flashing light there possibly to go across, or down by the access to Ring Mountain to go across, and certainly down by the school. But I just wanted to throw it out there that I think it would be pretty amazing if the multi-use path continued on the north side of the road, and get creative with how to fit that wide sidewalk in on the north side. So people going from East Corte Madera and or all the neighborhoods there would only have to cross the street once at a strategic spot and get the whole way down to the schools and do their recreation and or their commute with their kids back and forth in a very safe manner.
Okay. Tom, thanks for your comments there. And yeah, that continuity of trail, and we did hear about it. Your points was there's some reasoning on the north side. We also heard earlier there's some existing class 1 on the south side. So I think we need to put all of this stuff together and kind of what are the best options to look at for that continuity. So great comment. Thank you so much.
We have another question or comment from Tom Sherwood. That says, in planning bike improvements, you should bear in mind that no adult riders use a separate path west of Westward. So unless you mandate use of a path, you will still have bikes on the road.
Well, and that was west of?
Westward.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. Thank you. I think that was Tom in the chat.
Tom Sherwood.
Okay. Tom Sherwood. Thanks, Tom Sherwood, for your comments.
And then we have Jean. I'm sorry, I forgot how to pronounce her name, but I will allow her to talk again.
Yes, I wanted to share that I spoke with Lee Huo, who is the senior planner for the Bay Trail, the San Francisco Bay Trail, who was involved in original planning of this segment today. And he said that they find all over the Bay Area when you have fragments.
Uh-oh. Jean, we lost you. You went on mute, but we're still here.
I keep getting clicked off and then back on again. Sorry. Can you hear me now?
We hear you. Yeah, you spoke with Lee.
Okay, so I spoke with Lee and he said that they find that when there's a fragment, such as the existing fragment of class 1, it's inconvenient. And so people bicycling who would really like to be on a class 1 will end up on the road because it's too awkward to cross the road multiple times. So I've often wondered how easy it would be to simply move the whole Paradise Drive south into the existing multi-use path. Obviously, that's not this budget, but in order to make more room. because I do think it'd be a fabulous vision to go all the way basically from Trader Joe's on the bay side all the way to the town limits. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for your comment. Lee's a good guy too. All
We have
right,
Tom again.
Tom.
Oh, yes. Hello, this is Tom Knopfler again. I just wanted to say one more thing because I'm also an avid cyclist, right? So I use this area all the time. So when I'm cycling, either on my mountain bike to get to Mount Tam or doing Paradise Loop, which I do dozens and dozens of times, all the time. The cyclists are not going to use the multi-use path, and that's okay. And that's the way it should be, because think about riding the whole Paradise Loop. Nobody that rides a road bike goes onto the multi-use path, and you do not want the road bikers on the multi-use paths. So I guess respectfully to everyone, I would just like to make sure that, especially, that maybe there are some sharrows, that would be a really cool thing within the town, especially where we have double lanes, like in front of Nugget, to have that sharrow in the right-hand lane. And maybe there's something that can at least be on, the main part of Paradise Road down to, whatever the improvement would be, right? Because I'm guessing no matter what, there would be some widening, of the road. But anyway, I do think the road bikers are going to ride on the road, and that's what we do. If you ride in West Marin, you're riding on the roads. So to me, the most important part of this piece would be, how do you safely get from all the neighborhoods from Nugget and even closer to the school or further away to West Corte Madera? How do you get people and kids? And probably there's a lot of kids that, if there was a safe path that stayed on the north side of the road, if they could get down to the two wonderful schools down there, and even Cove School, right, on the north side of the road, what an amazing solution that would be. So that's my thought.
Yeah, great comments, and thanks for speaking to the kind of the different skill levels and riding habits of just different kinds of riders. I think that's not lost on us, but that often kind of gets overlooked in conversation. And a safe place for kids to ride their bikes and walk to school, more recreational cyclists versus very, very serious or more avid cyclists such as yourself that are in fact comfortable riding with traffic and on the street. So I think we need a vision that can address those different needs, different users. Thanks for that.
David McPherson again.
Thanks again. I think Tom Knopfsinger and Jean Semrenhaus and I all appreciate that this project is scoped from westward to Robin. But I think the challenge for the town and BKF is to make sure that the vision extends to Seawolf Passage and beyond. I have, for better than a decade, kind of been working on the assumption that the multi-use path on the south side would simply be extended to Robin Drive, and that would be fantastic. But ever since the town completed the widening of the sidewalk on Paradise Drive near Nugget, I really started to come around to the idea that Tom was discussing, which is the safety of our pedestrians and cyclists who live down near Robin, staying on the north side all the way to the ferry building for that matter, right? Without crossing back and forth across Paradise. I just think it'll be a real failure of vision if we're requiring young kids, in fact, they just won't do it, to cross over Paradise twice, going from Robin to San Clemente. And so that's what I would toss back to the town and BKF in closing my comments is, really the surveying and the how much room and how to massage this, and whether or not, you know, we get a grand design that can't be accomplished right away, you know, in the next year or so, but really has to wait for more funding so that it can tie the whole thing together.
Mhm.
And I would rather have it wait if that means waiting for additional funds than to doing it in a manner that requires kids and citizens to cross back and forth across Paradise. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
It
Any
doesn't look like we have any additional questions in the chat or in the Q&A, and no other hands raised at this time.
Anybody who hasn't made a comment yet? I see there's a number of other folks that are just listening out there. Anybody
have
want to weigh in?
Tom raising his hand again.
Anybody new? Tom.
Yeah, if you guys don't mind, one more thought, because I think this is amazing that we're even talking about this stuff, and I applaud the town and everything for the improvements that have happened in this town that I've lived in for the last 13 years. So, you know, and like I said, I do have a 13-year-old who rides his bike from Mariner Cove to Hall Middle School every day. And he did it in 6th grade, 7th grade, now 8th grade. And from where we are in Mariner Cove, especially with the improvement at Nugget, like it's amazing how many kids will ride that far to get to Hall Middle School safely, okay, on multi-use paths. Think if there was a multi-use path that stayed on the north side of the road the whole way down to these two amazing private schools, how many kids would actually ride their bike to those schools every day from 2nd grade until 12th grade? You know, I think you would find it could be, I don't know what the participation is right now of those schools, kids riding to school, but I'll bet it's extremely low because probably no parents will allow their kids to ride down there the way it is right now. But if there was a multi-use path, the way there is from my house to Hall Middle School, essentially, if there was a multi-use path that stayed on the north side of the road, I think the traffic jam problems would slow down, and the queuing problems would be solved. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tom. Anybody else who hasn't spoken yet and would like to? Because I think we'll start to wrap it up. Thank you, everybody, for all of your comments, your thoughts, your good questions. And, you know, the town is here on the call listening. And so really, it's much appreciated. On behalf of the consultant team, just thank you for all your good spirits and your insights here. And we really look forward to seeing everybody again and more of you, and with even more advanced noted next February. Stay in touch with us through the project website and the email address. And maybe it's worth just putting that on screen one more time. Poonam, if you could just do that. And with that, anybody from the town that just wants a last word? And while we're putting that there in the chat, we have the link to the website. So it's just a good place to stay in touch and make sure we have your contact information, and feel free to share that out with your networks, and we'll be making sure schools and such have that as well. And I think there on screen, yeah, just a little bit more about the website link. Also, I think there's a little update here in the email. So Public Works Counter at tcmmail.org. That's actually the best email address just for additional comments, questions, thoughts, and those will get to the appropriate person. All right. Thank you, everybody, for your time this evening and your contributions to this project. We'll see you next year. Good night.